The teams came out on Friday night, so time to have a quick look at them. We'll run through them now. Starting off with the Tipperary team, they're taking on Limerick on Sunday, so we're just going to have a quick look at their teams and see if it changes how we're looking at the games. So just to bring them on screen there, Tipperary team starting in goals, Brian Hogan. Cornerback, Cathal Barrett, Barry Heffernan and Sean O'Brien make up the full back line. Ronan Maher, Brendan Maher and Pádraig Maher. Noel McGrath and Alan Flynn at midfield. Mark Keogh, Jason Ford, Niall O'Mara. And then John McGrath, Seamus Callanan and Jake Morris. Limerick, Nicky Quaid's in goals. Sean Finn, Dan Morrissey, Barry Nash, Dermot Burns, Declan Hannon, Darragh O'Donovan. Midfield is Cian Lynch and Will O'Donoghue. Then Gerard Hegarty, Kyle Hayes and Tom Morrissey, with a full forward line of Graham Mulcahy, Aaron Gillan and Peter Casey. So the thing that kind of stands out with Tipperary straight away is maybe the amount of physical players they have at their disposal that aren't actually lining out in this game. So Bonner Maher, we're not sure because the bench isn't there. Is he carrying any sort of an injury issue? Same with Dan McCormick. Obviously, Seamus Kennedy isn't available. Bubbles Dwyer, obviously not a massively physical player, but he's also not available here. That full back line, Sean O'Brien probably had a tough Munster final last year. Him going in there, maybe a little bit of a surprise. He's most likely going to pick up Peter Casey or Graham Mulcahy. Maybe Brendan Maher will stay centre back. Maybe he'll go full back because Barry Heffernan, excellent player and all as he is, don't know if he's necessarily suited to Mark and Aaron Gillan, having a little ball popped in front of him and having the pace to react. Like, he's a great man to cover distance, but in shorter areas, maybe Brendan Maher, maybe even Ronan Maher will go back full back. We'll see how that pans out. The left flank of that Limerick defence, Barry Nash and Darragh O'Donovan, while they're both really, really good players, you might associate them both with playing further up the field. Now, Barry Nash has obviously been restyled as a wing back, going back even to last year and looked really impressive there, but had some ropey moments cornerback against Clare. He's back there again, and surely it's an opportunity for Tipperary to look for mismatches, try and bring Sean Finn away from goals a little bit, and hopefully then have the likes of John McGrath, Seamus Callanan or Jake Morris in there for one-on-ones against Dan Morrissey and Barry Nash, who aren't necessarily native backs there. So Tipperary have named Alan Flynn midfield, and you can be as sure as oats are oats that he's going to man-mark Cian Lynch. We've seen Alan Flynn do this before with the likes of Tony Kelly and different players, that he'd man-mark them and follow them wherever they go to field. But if that means that Alan Flynn is going up inside his own, the far 65, that will leave gaps at the back. So you'd imagine Niall O'Mara and Mark Keogh, assuming he plays midfield, will filter back a little bit. Jason Ford is named at number 11, but maybe he'll be further inside. And Jake and John McGrath, as we've seen at centre forward before, he'll perhaps play there. Otherwise, Darragh O'Donovan wing back is an interesting one. He plays centre back for his club, Doon, this year with Richie English out injured. And going to wing back is slightly different. Now, the fact that he'll probably be dragged out the field by a Tipperary wing forward, who, like Tipperary, know they can't get opened up at the back as they were last year. Darragh O'Donovan will be a danger with the ball in hand. He's a great option for anyone to give it to and let him distribute from the back line of Limerick. It's just, can Tipperary find a size mismatch on him? Would he go well on Seamus Callanan if he moved out there? John McGrath and put puckouts on them. Like, Donovan's an excellent player, and some people are suggesting on Twitter there that maybe Will O'Donoghue would swap with him and go half back. I don't necessarily see that, because I think that Will O'Donoghue is such an imposing player there. Does it change how you look at the game, how we think it would go? I think probably slightly, yeah. I think Limerick are more favourites after seeing that team. Both of them have pretty good benches. I think Tipperary have an exceptional bench, and that, of course, is assuming, well, we don't know necessarily who's going to be fit or not, but it does change my thinking somewhat. The Wexford against Galway teams here. We'll start off with Galway. Éanna Murphy's in goals, Sean Loftus, Fintan Burke and Aidan Hart. So Fintan Burke is in and Davey Burke is out. Presumably he's still injured after getting pulling up for Turlough in the county final. Pádraig Mannion, Grode McInerney and Shane Cooney's the half back line. Cathal Mannion and Johnny Cohen. Then a half forward line of Conor Cooney, Joe Canning and Joseph Cooney, with Brian Concannon, Conor Whelan and Jason Flynn up in the forward line. So there's some suggestions maybe that Fintan Burke could come out in the half back line, that Shane Cooney would go to centre back and Grode McInerney would go full back as he was in the league. So that remains to be seen. Davey Burke, apparently he's been carrying a bit of an issue recently. First time in about 5 years that he hasn't started. Cathal Mannion is midfield, and we saw Shane O'Neill experimenting with that during the league. He's keeping that going here. In the forward, like Joseph Cooney, I think he played in the centre back or in the half back line during a challenge match recently. So will he play there? I think he'll certainly at a minimum drop out towards midfield. And there's an awful lot of players that you'd look at and think they're inside forwards here. I consider Conor Cooney an inside forward, the same with Concannon, Conor Whelan, and Jason Flynn. And there's four of them there, so it'll be very interesting to see who plays inside, who plays outside. Because I don't know if I'd be overly delighted with those options in the half forward line outside of Canning and Joseph Cooney, who are obviously both brilliant. And Canning will certainly be man marked by Matthew O'Hanlon as he has been for the last 3 or 4 years. Brian Concannon had a great league. I think Conor Whelan with him inside is a really good duo. Conor Cooney might be in there. I thought Evan Nyland might even get the nod based on his league campaign, but it's hard to tell. That's so long ago now that it's probably almost irrelevant. The Wexford team has a very familiar look. Maybe there'll be a change to it closer to the time or just before throw-in. Mark Fanning in goals, Simon Donoghue, Liam Ryan and Damien Reck. Paddy Foley, Matthew O'Hanlon and Sean Murphy, Kevin Foley, who'll obviously go back as sweeper, and Diarmuid O'Keefe, Jack O'Connor, Lee Chin, Liam McGovern, Rory O'Connor, Conor MacDonald and Paul Morris. I'd expect Conor MacDonald to be the target man inside, as everyone would. Paul Morris maybe flitting off him, and Rory O'Connor told, go where you like. I think there's great puck out options there. Jack O'Connor, Lee Chin, Liam McGovern, great pace and should have been an all-star nominee last year as far as I was concerned. Again, it just has a feeling of absolute war, this particular game, and unbelievably tight. So we'll see how that one gets on. So now I think we'll move on to the next game, which is Kilkenny against Dublin. And I'll just bring it up on screen here. In goals for Dublin, well, basically it's the same team as hammered Laois last week. Alan Nolan's in goal, Paddy Smith, Owen O'Donnell, James Madden, Conor Burke, Dara Gray, Cian O'Callaghan. Midfield of Sean Moran and Rian McBride, Cian Boland, Chris Crummy and Danny Sutcliffe, and a full forward line of Donald Burke, Davy Keogh and Ronan Hayes. So I'm just running through the Kilkenny team then, and actually even to list some of the players that aren't starting. Paul Murphy's on the bench. Joey Holden, who might have had a shoulder injury recently, he's not in there. Tommy Walsh, who had a great club campaign and got man of the match against Colin Fennelly, I think, in the opening round for Tullaroan, he's on the bench. Connor Brown's not in there this year either, nor Richie Leahy. Richie Hogan's on the bench. So an awful lot of talent on the bench. Certainly Brian Cody seems to be moving with some of the younger players. So in goals, obviously Owen Murphy's always going to be there. Conor Delaney gets his chance again. He would have got one sooner, I think, but for injury. Hugh Lawler and Kieran Wallace is the player that people haven't probably seen too much of other than the league. A half-back line of Pádraig Walsh, Paddy Deacon and Richie Reid. Now they're all really good players in their own right, but if you're the sum of their parts, it's not necessarily the most imposing half-back line. They can all catch a ball, but will they be snapping ball over that Dublin half-forward line with Crummy and Danny Sutcliffe? That remains to be seen, and if they do, I think Kilkenny are going to go to town. But if not, it's going to be a tight game for long spells. Killian Buckley in midfield, would probably prefer to see him in the half-back line if I was a Kilkenny supporter. Conor Fogarty back out to midfield. He can be really solid there at the base of midfield. John Donnelly, TJ Reid and Walter Walsh is a very strong half-forward line and physically imposing, and work rate will be huge there. Billy Ryan, Colin Fennelly and Owen Cody, who believes scored 3-5 in a challenge match against Clare not so long ago. So Brian Cody's giving youth its chance there. Billy Ryan looks like he has pace, looks like he has hurling. He looks like a really impressive player. Owen Cody the same. Probably James Madden picking up Owen Cody would be my guess. Owen O'Donnell and Colin Fennelly, and Paddy Smith picking up Billy Ryan. So we'll see how that pans out. And Dara Gray probably man-marked TJ Reid. And if I was to guess, I think Sean Moran will go back on Walter Walsh. But we'll see how that pans out. I think it's going to be a tight game for long spells. I think most people are expecting Dublin to eventually fade out in that game, but kind of remains to be seen. The final game of the weekend is going to be, that what I'm going to look at, is Waterford against Cork. So the Waterford team was probably named earlier than any other team this week. Stephen O'Keefe is in goals, Shane Fives, Conor Prunty and Shane McNulty, Callum Lyons, Tyke Burka and Austin Gleeson, Jamie Barron and Jake Dillon. Then you're looking at a half-forward line of Kevin Moran, Jack Fagan and Kieran Bennett, with an inside line of Desi Hutchinson, Stephen Bennett and Jack Prendergast. So one of the things that stands out here is Austin Gleeson named at wing back, and actually Kevin Moran, who you would assume would be wing back, named at wing forward. And maybe those two things would flip, but I'm not 100% sure if Liam Cahill would name a dummy team. So maybe this is the way it'll be. I think Desi Hutchinson's going to be inside. I think Stephen Bennett is going to play as the target man in there with him, and Jack Prendergast I expect to move around everywhere. Kieran Bennett scored something like 5 points from play against Cork at the start of the year in a league game. He was really good, so I think he probably will play there, even though we've seen him in the half-back line before. Jack Fagan, he'll be a puck-out option throughout the game, as well as everything else. He's a good player. Conor Prunty picked up Patrick Horgan during the league. He was quite good. I believe Dara Fives picked up an injury during the week, so he's a big loss. And I'd say his head is melted from all the injuries over the years. The Cork team is Anthony Nash in goals, full back line of Damien Cahalane, Colin Spillane, Sean O'Donoghue, Christopher Joyce, Robert Downey, Mark Coleman, midfield of Bill Cooper and Tim O'Mahony, Seamus Harnedy, Conor Lahan, and Aidan Walter, the half forward line, with an inside line of Alan Cadigan, Shane Kingston, and Patrick Horgan. Like, that's a front six as good as anything in the country, and there's definitely ball winning ability with Seamus Harnedy and Aidan Walter in that half forward line. With Conor Lahan's pace, they have an ability to really trouble that Waterford half back line. And as I said, I do think that Waterford will flood the middle area a little bit, and we'll see what Cork are made of in there, because so many people question their bottle, but like the talent, you certainly couldn't question. Like Shane Kingston, I think, was their form player during the league, and if he retains that, he's going to be a serious threat. Maybe Shane Fives will pick him up with Shane McNulty and Alan Cadigan, and to be honest, if good ball goes in, it doesn't really matter what your form is. Alan Cadigan is going to do an awful lot of damage to you. I would expect Colin Spillane and Damien Cahalane to be the two men picking up Desi Hutchinson and Stephen Bennett. Actually, do you know what? Maybe this is where there's a bit of a mismatch, because Sean O'Donoghue would be probably more suited to marking Jack Prendergast than Desi Hutchinson, the smaller, quicker players, because he's got that bit of pace. I'm not sure if Damien Cahalane is necessarily suited to Desi Hutchinson or Colin Spillane, but maybe Colin Spillane on Desi Hutchinson, Damien Cahalane and Stephen Bennett, probably the most likely. Robert Downey is named at number 6, and we've seen him at fullback before, but I think when you're that tall, the half back line is a better place for you, because often you'll get a ball popped into space in front of you on a guy who's quite fast, and I think being overly tall isn't necessarily the most helpful thing in the world. So we'll see how that pans out. Kieran Bennett possibly come up against Robert Coleman and against Mark Coleman. Christopher Joyce picking up I would say Kevin Moore. That seems like the most natural sort of a fit there. Really tight game, I expect. Again, not necessarily the most powerful bench for Waterford there, and even the same, I suppose, to Cork to some degree as well. But that should be a really tight game. Those are the teams, and please let us know what you think. Those are my thoughts.